the meantime, there's been a few topics that are kind of top of mind for us. And one of them is basically about how honesty and transparency are really, really key to not feeling anxious. We just made a video, and it's going to be titled How to Be Comfortable in Your Own Skin. And a lot of the stuff that we covered in that video was when you're in a situation and you are feeling pressure to be a certain way, to say certain things, and in general, you just feel uncomfortable in your own skin and you kind of feel that restless energy. A lot of that is due to a form of dishonesty. Maybe you're not outright lying, but you're not being totally authentic. You're not being totally true to yourself. There's kind of like a misalignment, and you want to be totally aligned, and you can feel that you want to be totally aligned, but it's just not happening. Maybe you're at a party and there's like word vomit and you're just saying things and you're not sure why. You're trying to press people, or maybe you're wanting to say things, but you're totally quiet and you're just kind of stuck inside. So these are some of the examples of how it can show up. But in general, there's a feeling of pressure and uncomfort that comes with that. And oftentimes we don't even realize that that's the reason, because we go through our lives developing these different personalities, these different ways of showing up, and we get used to it. And so because of that, we forget what it felt like to be authentic in the first place. And so that was one issue that's, I guess, we wanted to address because it's been relevant in our own lives recently. Like, what does that mean to be authentic?
Well, it's also such an accelerator of anxiety to be inauthentic, and most of the inauthentic behaviors we have. Sorry, I have my dog leash still on. I have my dog's leash wrapped around me. But as far as dealing with anxiety, a lot of the inauthentic behavior, and I think we'll stop saying that word to try to describe it, is based on anxiety. I have to act a certain way. I can't share my opinion about this. I can't go against the grain. I can't just be in what I'm in. I have to act a certain way. I have to be a certain way in a work context, in a social context, in a romantic context. And that in of itself, I mean, we've talked about persona fatigue. I feel like we use that term a lot because it's so relevant nowadays. We can see a lot of things from social media as far as what the other person's doing and use that as an example of what we think we need to do. Yeah. Instead of just doing whatever, just doing how we feel or being in our energy. While we were shooting videos today, it was interesting for me to just be present with myself and feel the need to do something or be something or the fear of, what if I don't have something when you stop talking? And it for real, it was just an interesting experience to just be with that and say, and then be able to kind of soothe that anxious part of me and be like, it's okay. Like, it's okay if there's a pause in the video. It's okay if there's, he says something and maybe I disagree and then we have a discussion about it. That's all really great and okay. But the real thing, the real piece of it that's important to know is that it's hard to be authentic, or it can be hard to get in the flow of being authentic. But not doing that has such a great cost for those who can suffer from high anxiety, panic attacks, and depression. And that can be the main source of your downward spiral. Yeah, people don't realize how much of a cause that it really is. Like, when you're feeling anxious, having panic attacks, having depersonalization, derealization, all of these can be totally caused by that self-imposed pressure. I remember one of the worst derealization stints that I had was during a family gathering where there were just a lot of different people. And I don't know if you've ever had this experience where the way that you show up around one person is different than the way you show up around another person. 100%.
And then when they get together and you are hanging out with both of them, there's like this, who do I be?
Ping pong effect. Yeah.
And this is a good example of, that inauthentic sort of pattern where you're showing up as a different version to each person, and there isn't a comfortable, smooth transition to find like, well, this is me in any situation. This is me in whatever situation I feel comfortable in. And so when that family gathering happened, there was so much control, internal control that was happening. I was watching every other word that I was saying. I was very self-conscious about how I'm sitting, all this kind of stuff. And it created a few days of intense depersonalization, derealization. And it wasn't until I got back home and I was just sitting there in my house alone where it started to finally dawn on me that, oh, I've been putting on a show for like the last week.
Yeah.
And that's why I'm so drained. And that's why I feel so hazy and brain fog. And
Yeah.
it just clicked.
Absolutely. I want to welcome everybody to the chat. I'm Jim. This is Ennis. If you're not familiar with us, we are doing the Inner Solutions Anxiety and Mental Health live stream. Feel free to share your stories, throw your questions in the chat, or anything that's on your mind, or even just check in with how you're feeling today. How's your heart? Because one of the main purposes of this community is to be able just to be open and share with low judgment, and also so that you know, like, you're not alone in whatever you're going through.
It's a little chicken.
It's a little check-in, a little chicken.
Yeah.
So, I mean, we're talking about the cost of inauthenticity and suppression. And one of the main causes, or one of the main hurdles to overcoming inauthenticity is learning how to speak from a deeper, more truthful place. And even just identifying when you're, maybe bullshitting yourself or BSing somebody else.
I feel like that's the primary challenge is you're BSing yourself.
Yeah.
So you go through life and you desperately want to feel like you've got it together,
Mm-hmm.
and that everything's okay and that it's not that bad and it'll go away soon and all this other kind of rationalization. But deep down, at some point, the uncomfort of all the lies starts to stack up, and you end up just kind of having maybe not a full breakdown, but some sort of breakdown in the sense that you get a moment where you're just honest with yourself, at least, and you say, you know what, I have been struggling this week. I have been feeling bad this week. Yeah. I have been this and this and this. And instead of I feel like sometimes people have that glimpse where it's like, I have been feeling like this. And it's immediately followed by some sort of apology. I noticed this even in my own journaling, where I was I was writing down how I was feeling, and I wrote down something along the lines of some mistake that I was making. And then in the next sentence I wrote, but here's why I'm working on it, blah, 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 blah. It was like I couldn't even stay with that mistake for more than a second. Like, the moment I admitted that I was making this mistake, I immediately felt the urge to come up with a plan of like, well, here's what I'm doing to avoid this or to improve this. Or the difference here is when you're not lying to yourself, you can actually stay with the emotion for a bit.
Any discomfort.
Yeah. And just say, I feel bad. And then you just stay with it for like a minute at least, right?
Yeah. I liked how you said that. I feel bad.
Right.
It's true, though. It's very true.
Because when you stay with it, things start to happen that are not based off of, let me push it back down, or let me get rid of it really quick, or let me
control the situation. Mm-hmm. Yeah, let me get ahead, cut the tension.
What would somebody think if they saw this, or all that kind of stuff?
Yeah.
There's just like a being with it.
Yeah, I think it would be useful just to describe what it would be like to, and this ties into authenticity, but I think it also ties into low anxiety. What does it look like? Maybe we could describe a little bit of just the characteristics of what is some of the big differentials we see. I could do it for myself as far as kind of being in an anxious state, even just day to day, and also being in a much lower anxious state, just day to day. Like, what are some of the key characteristics? And we talk a lot about social interaction, so maybe we could start there.
I know for me, it starts with the body. My body feels more rigid, more tense. There's like a restless, agitated kind of energy running through me when I'm anxious or when I'm not centered. And when I'm interacting with people from that place, I tend to be more showy, more overtly animated.
Yeah.
I tend to be, I might talk really fast because I feel like they're not going to listen to me if I talk slowly. So I talk really fast to get my point across. And then on top of that, there's a difficulty with true listening where I might catch myself just kind of thinking about my own stuff instead of actually listening.
Mm-hmm.
And all of this is connected. All of it's basically, you're just preoccupied. You're preoccupied with how you feel and how you're doing, how you're coming off. And I know for me, when I'm in that mode, it just generally feels bad. It feels like a state of,
Comparatively, it feels much worse.
Because when I find myself in that calm, collected state, conversely, there's this settled feeling, like I'm just settled, where I notice I can sit there and my feet aren't doing that like tapping thing.
Yeah.
Or I can breathe. I can talk and then I won't run out of breath. That's
yeah. I love that.
Or I don't have to catch my breath every time. Or just, being able to kind of not feel rushed. There's just this lack of rushedness where we have all the time in the world.
Mm.
And it's these are just words that we're describing, but it's such a difference experientially, like being in that anxious mode versus that calm, collected mode where you're just saying what's true. You're just saying what's true, essentially.
Yeah.
And when you're, I guess, lying, you're kind of going into your imagination of like, let me come up with something to say, versus when it's true, you're just kind of looking for what's there already. And when you're looking for what's there already, I can feel it in my eyes. Like I know that when I'm coming up with things, my eyes look in a certain direction, and when I'm recalling things, my eyes look in a certain direction. And so when someone says, "How are you doing?" and there's like an imagination happening, or I'm imagining some false
what do I want to say to
ideal
that? Yeah. What do I want to put forward to them? Yeah.
Versus like a reflection of like, I feel this, that is one definite signature. How about you? What are some telltale signs?
For me, it's a lot of eye contact, and definitely I can relate with the physical symptoms. Like usually I'm here, I'm drinking a cup of coffee after every time I speak, and I'm taking a sip and just doing things and moving. And now I feel much more calm, much more grounded, because this has been a primary source of exploration for me for the last about week or two with a therapist. I think I've done about 5 sessions, and this is the main focus has been, this anxiety, this fear of for me, performance, but even just in day to day of being honest and catching these behaviors I have, these people pleasing behaviors, these protective, avoidant behaviors, things like, sharing, how much money I make, or putting forward, an image of togetherness or of alpha male status, or whatever it is, bravado, whatever the bullshit is that I'm putting forward. And there's a real side to it, but there's a balance of when it's clearly like compensatory, and it's clearly, inadvertently manipulative to people. And it's based all on anxiety for me. I mean, a big part of it came from seeing, like, going out on a date with somebody and just like after the fact being like, whoa, that was like a tornado. Like, what was I doing and saying? And it wasn't like I was just bullshitting this and bullshitting that, but I could feel this like tension and this anxiety to like be entertaining, like be funny, be charming, pull a good move. And it's just like, it is detrimental to the experience in a certain way. Like, I still had fun, but still just being slowed down and present and being mindful and thoughtful was it would have been way better.
Yeah. do you what you just said reminded me of Hanako and I, my significant other. We watched a movie called Just Friends. You ever seen that? It's like
No, I was gonna make a joke to make fun of you, but I figured no.
It was, what's his name? The guy who plays the Daredevil type guy, or Deadpool. What's the actor?
Ryan Reynolds.
Ryan Reynolds, and he plays this guy who was like really fat, really nerdy in high school, and he was in love with his best friend.
You know, it's really funny, as I have seen this.
Yeah. Just anyone who hasn't, it's like classic, like this guy's in the friend zone,
romantic comedy,
and he gets rejected, and he there's this big scene where like everyone in the school is basically laughing at him, and he just says, "I'll show you all. I'm gonna become somebody." And like 10 years later, it fast forward, and he's this like rigid kind of like player in LA.
Yeah.
And he's just like very guarded, and he comes back to his hometown, and he like sees all his old friends, and he sees the girl he used to love.
Yeah.
And it's this beautiful, perfect story of like, at first it's just him putting on this front.
Yeah.
Like they go on a date, and he's just like name dropping like all these people in LA he works with, and he's acting like this big hot shot. And throughout the movie, life just shits in his face. He just gets stomped to the ground with different catastrophe after catastrophe, until I guess just through sheer exhaustion, he finally his shell kind of cracks, and he goes back to like being his high school self, where he's laughing and he's making jokes and he's just being silly and unguarded. And of course, because of that, the girl falls in love with him. But it was a perfect story of like,
it's universal, man.
Yeah.
That's the thing to know about. You're gonna get cracked down. Like there's gonna be some form of bottom or some form of kind of peak tension that you're gonna hit, that you're going to. It's inevitable if you don't figure this out. So that's a lot of what mental health is staying away from that, like rock bottom, for real. It's respecting that you can really go to a deep place, and you need to practice staying away from that.
Yeah, life will keep hitting you until you start moving with it, and it'll go as low as you want.
For real. Things can actually get worse.
Yeah. Until you finally crack, and you're like,
yeah,
I give up.
Yeah.
And it's not a giving up like a suicide giving up. That's not what I'm saying. It's like a giving up like, I just can't pretend anymore.
Yeah,
I'm not going to put up this facade anymore.
Can't keep doing the same stuff. I feel like we've said shit a lot. We swear. This is the curse. This is the curse podcast. But really, you're going to hit a point where you're like, okay, that's enough. And you hit it all the time in your life with friends, with romantic partners, with your children, anything.
It's really interesting.
All right, let's read some. Noelle says, this past weekend I had I think she meant out of body experience, like I was an outsider looking into my life. I was not my true self. I wasn't talking and acting like myself. I was a totally different person. That's depersonalization.
That out of body experience
of depersonalization
is perfect. It's like, you're looking at yourself doing and saying things, and it's like, am I in control here? Am I the one saying this? And sometimes that can also be, sometimes presence can feel like that, where you are like this witness and observer of your life. And they're different because one is hallmarked by a feeling of anxiety, and one is hallmarked by a feeling of deep peace. And so, but they can both seem like an out-of-body experience. But what you're saying is interesting. When you, the fact that you can know, right? This is not my true self. I wasn't talking or acting like myself. I was a totally different person. That recognition is interesting. The ability for you to go into your conscious, to your guidance system, to whatever inner voice you have, and to look at that and know, hold on, this isn't in alignment for me. If you can follow that, that's where it starts, right? If you don't have that, I'm not sure what to say. That's the first most vital step, is to get clear on, does this feel like it's in alignment for me? Am I putting on any kind of facade right now? Am I trying too hard right now? Am I guarding myself? Is there something I'm not saying?
Yeah.
And when you get more and more and more aware of it, it starts to hurt more and more and more when you do it.
Mm-hmm.
It's like,
it
goes from being this like, it goes from being like lying and not even really feeling that bad about it to lying and now you feel sick to your stomach because you're just so aware of it. And over time, that will grind you down. Yeah. So it's like this pattern of you become more and more and more aware of all the ways you're faking it. The act of faking it hurts more and more and more. Not in like sometimes in a physical way where you feel like physically sick to your stomach and kind of like, why did I do that? Why did I say that? And that is the teacher that brings you back to center.
100%. Yeah, we all have that inner compass. And once we touch that spot of authenticity, once we touch that spot of clarity, it just feels so good. It's so good.
Yeah.
Cheryl says, hi. Hi, Cheryl.
Hi.
Missy says she's overwhelmed. Too many things going on. Yeah, Missy, slow down and just, get in touch with your trust and your faith that everything's going to be okay. If you need to, sit down and just write stuff out 100%. But also, in writing stuff out, just look at it and ask yourself, do I need to be concerned about this? Like, do I need to be anxious about this? What's in my control and what's not?
Yeah, I find when a lot of people these days are overwhelmed, and rightfully so. You have a lot going on.
Yeah.
You have too much going on. And there's a great story of, I can't remember it, but the gist was this guy cuts out a bunch of the stuff he was doing, and he got really scared that because he was like doing 80%, only 20% of the stuff, that his life would go into ruin, and there was barely a difference. Like he stopped hanging out with certain people. He stopped answering certain calls. He stopped showing up to certain meetings. He stopped letting go of certain responsibilities, and his life pretty much just improved overall. Like take an audit for anyone right now who feels overwhelmed. Take an audit. There's surely something in your life that you don't need to be doing. Yeah. That you don't need to be spending time on, worrying about, giving energy to. Yeah. That is making very, very little impact. There's a great principle called the Pareto principle, where basically 80% of your results come from 20% of your actions. And this can be good and bad, meaning 80% of that which gives you joy and fulfillment probably comes from 20% of the time that you spend. And 80% of the stuff that stresses you out, makes you feel overwhelmed, is probably coming from like 20% of your life. So look at that. Look at that low-hanging fruit of what can I just cut out? What can I delegate? What can I automate? What can I get rid of in whatever creative way I can to simplify my life at this time?
Yeah, and take that writing down or that audit of all the stuff and just play the what if game. Like, what if I didn't worry about, my daughter's schoolwork, or what if I let go of, controlling where, my husband is, anything that you feel like is just on your mind. Because we're not even talking about just logistically what's going on. It's also just what's on your mind. What kind of thoughts you're having? Yeah. Noelle says, Missy, I'm the same way. Little empathy, compassion. Cheryl says, I've been trying to pause when asked and really answer honestly instead of the just good answer. The thing about that authenticity that we were talking about is it's for big things, it's for everything. It's literally for everything. And was it here we talked about the repair, or was that in the video? I think that was in the video. Like, the first step to really catching yourself and correcting the behavior is to do the repair, meaning if you tell somebody, if you're inauthentic, or if you catch yourself on autopilot, or if you embellish on a story, if you throw something out there that's not quite authentic, go back, call the person, literally call them and correct it and say, hey, I noticed that, we were talking about whether or not I wanted kids, and I said something that I thought would just like please you or kind of keep the conversation, be non-controversial. And the truth is, this is really how I feel. Yeah. Incredibly powerful.
That happened to me.
That exact thing happened to me.
I mean, God, that's happened. There was one time where I just got a new client and I sent the wrong text. I thought I was texting you, and then ended up texting them. And it created this sort of confusion. And I remember I had instinctively, almost like very quickly, try to cover it up.
Yeah.
And then like 2 minutes later, I'm like, what am I doing? I let them know like the full context. And I think, for one, having talked to that person, I think that whole situation kind of freaked them out. But it was like the hardest thing ever in the moment.
Yeah.
To be, okay, I just got to tell the truth here, even if it makes me look bad. And that's the funny thing about being honest or being truthful, is sometimes it feels bad at first.
Yeah.
But it pays a lot in the back end. It feels good later on. It feels great in general. And so, do it even when it feels bad, I guess, I mean, there's some wisdom. I think, sometimes people will take that and go, okay, well, I think this person's a nut job. I think they're bad. I think they suck. I'm going to tell them. Well, is that thought really true? It's true that you're thinking it,
right?
But is that thought really true? And so there's always another level of honesty there. Sometimes when I'm really, really gung-ho about that practice I just have nothing to say.
Yeah.
And that's fine.
Shut
Sometimes
up.
you don't have anything to say.
Just keep your mouth shut. It's perfect.
Yeah.
I have to learn that about myself too. It's like, I don't have to fill the space.
Yeah.
And that's one of the main differences I find in kind of the day-to-day is just space. Like just space. Or, if maybe I say something or ask a question that might feel intrusive or might be provoking to somebody, letting that space sit and letting them think about it and letting them answer for themselves instead of trying to cover up or backtrack or anything. It's like, it's okay. It says, good evening. Good evening.
Good evening.
Good evening. Missy says, one thing I can always do to keep myself grounded when things get too intense is Jim knows the answer. I'm assuming she means ride some motorcycles. Vroom, vroom.
Man, I've always wanted to ride a motorcycle.
Yeah, I got one.
Can I take it for a spin?
I'll teach you how to ride it. It's really heavy, though.
I might need like a pocket rocket. What are those? Or a crotch rocket? What are they?
Something lighter.
Something lighter?
Yeah, you're kind of skinny. In a good way.
I'm thin.
Missy says, find something that you can do that will keep you centered, doing a puzzle, going for a walk, etc. Yeah, it's a good
on that note, I used to avoid giving that advice of find something to do. And now I've kind of changed my mind about it a little bit, where I don't think you should just fill space for the sake of filling space. I do think you should be generally, when you have that uncomfortable void, sit with it somewhat so that you're allowing these old emotions to come up and be processed. You don't have to fill every little moment. That being said, I think that human beings are really at our best when we're engaged and focused. And if you go days and days without that, life can start to seem a little bit abstract. It's good to once a day for a few hours to have something that you're just engaged in. It could be a painting, a drawing, a song, fixing your car, writing a letter, making something.
What do you mean engaged in, though? Do you mean like a creative activity, or do you mean just a singular focus thing?
I think anything that makes you forget yourself for a bit. And for some people that, I think for a lot, it depends on who you are, right? I think any creative thing is great. Like making music, making art, making something with your hands or your mind is a perfect one, because it just engages you on multiple levels. If you can't do that, then do something practical like washing the dishes, cleaning your whole house, and just being engaged with it and just being in the flow of that activity. And if that's not available to you, sometimes I remember when I watched the Avengers movie. It was like a 3-hour long movie. I remember when I came out of that, I was like, who am I?
Yeah.
What am I doing?
I can remember coming out of that and being like, I'm Iron Man. Feeling more superhero-y.
It felt good. Like, not just because I had relaxed for a bit, but because for 3 hours I had forgotten about myself. And I came out of it and it was like a reset.
Yeah.
And so that kind of engaged activity is really beautiful. I don't think it should be something, but it has to be engaged. It can't be something like calling a friend for 20 minutes, scrolling Facebook for 10 minutes, watching some crappy TV show for 30 minutes. It has to be something that really captures you on multiple levels.
Yeah. I feel like a good coaching session is like that, whether you're the coach or the coachee. Like for me, being in a therapy session definitely feels like that. It feels like just unlocking different layers and understanding and deeper, having a deeper understanding of what's going on inside of me and bringing that to the surface to be processed with my intellectual mind. I feel like they're almost like they're linked systems, but they're very different. You're intellectual and emotional. And so once you become more aware of kind of what's in the subconscious, but subconscious meaning beneath your current level of awareness, and you bring that forward to that new level of awareness where it's like, wow, this has been going on and I don't even know it. It's like if you're the CEO of a company and you like finally do like a department check where you go visit different departments. You're like, wow, this is what's happening over here.
You're still working here?
This is human resources. Like, what's going on? Yeah. And so it's so illuminating, but it's so engaging too. It's so, with a good coach or counselor, it's very, very engaging.
Love it.
Let's take a look here. Edita says, thank you, Jim, for today, for giving me the answers that I needed. Edita, the answers were in you all along.
They really were.
That's corny, but it's true. Be in a moment, not past or what the future will bring. Just be. Beautiful. Cheryl says, good idea, the what if. Yeah, what if is a big one. What if what if I just got up and left this stream right now? What if what if I just jumped on the table and started dancing? No, but for real, like what would it be like to, live in a different situation? What would it be like to get out of this relationship? What would it be like to, cut up my credit cards? I mean, throwing those kind of like that visualization or just that question can be the start to some amazing sustainable change.
That's like the core of what got me out of depression is that kind of practice. That it's a cognitive behavioral style practice of let's ask what if. Jim has a great version of that question, which is, if that's true, what does it mean about me? That's such a great question if you think about that.
Question, yeah.
Let's say that you are afraid of losing your job. Okay. If let's say I lose my job, if that's true, what does it mean about me? Well, it means that I might have some financial issues. I might get some judgment from my family. I might be lost for a while. I might never get a job again. All these things that become surfaced from that question. You can ask that question again to all of those things that become surfaced. And this is why it's really, really important to do this with a piece of paper, because you're not going to keep track of everything in your head. It's really, really important to do this with a piece of paper. So just keep writing down, keep asking that question. If that's true, if that thought is true, what does it mean about me? And keep going. And oftentimes what you find is you uproot some really deep concerns, like concerns about loneliness and death and rejection and what it means to be you, what it means to be alive. And a lot of questions that we think we're not thinking them, but you are thinking them on some level. They're just not conscious, but they're still running your life every day. And so it's really important to look at that and go, is that true? Do I know that's true? Do I really, really know that's true? And just kind of look at the illogical natures of it. I had a story I was going to share, but I just realized it'd be private, so never mind.
Hey, good for you for setting boundaries.
Client confidentiality.
Yeah, you can't. We're not gonna do that. So Missy says, what I meant is when I go for a ride, especially when things are too much and anxiety is all-time high, it helps me take a break and calm down. So when I get back, things are clear and able to focus. Yeah, I mean, one of the key elements of any sort of movement in your kind of emotional or mental health journey is like the extraction, the regroup, and then the re-entry, like the re-engagement. So it's like, Eddie talks about taking a cold shower here. And what that is, it's a zap to the system. Like, hey, kind of snap out of the automatic behavior, the behavior that's already carved. And so, Missy, what you're doing when you take a ride, and I do this too sometimes, is you're kind of forcing yourself out of whatever thought patterns you're in because you have to focus when you're on a motorcycle. That does, for me, what happened was I actually habituated so that I would keep the thought patterns as I got more comfortable on the motorcycle. Like as I still could be ruminating, and so that didn't work for me after a while. But at first, it's really you're strapped to a rocket, basically, just like, and so you're like, oh, it's so engaging.
Yeah.
But then as I got more comfortable, I think my mind was able to go to kind of like when you're driving, you're thinking about something. It's kind of that muscle memory. And changes.
That's an interesting thing about I have literally had the experience where I'm sitting in a chair at my desk thinking something. I get up to the kitchen and I forget about it.
Yeah.
And the moment I sit back down, it's like there.
Yeah.
And it's crazy how subtle that can be, right? And how just changing your environment. I think this is why I crave things like travel and going to new countries where literally there's new sights, sounds, smells, textures, tastes, people, energies, cultures, and there's nothing to trigger old parts of you. And there's an opportunity to discover a new version of yourself. You ever had the experience where you hang out with like friends from high school, and you hang out with friends from college, and then you hang out with new people that you just met.
Yeah.
And with all of them, there's like this, it's almost like you have more permission. You have permission to be whoever you want, anytime you want, but you yourself, or you're giving yourself permission to be different around that new person because they don't know you yet. But then when you go back to that old friend who has all these experiences of you and maybe expectations of you, it's like you kind of step back into like who you think they want you to be. A lot of people have this issue with their family. It's like they go move to a different city, they establish themselves in they become a totally different person. They grow, they mature, and then they come home for the holidays and it's this regression. And they don't know how to...
And it doesn't feel good typically for most people. It feels like it's almost like an autopilot, like forced into an autopilot thing.
They don't want to be that way.
Yeah.
But they don't know how to be authentic in front of their parents.
Yeah.
Is the root of it, basically.
Yeah, sure. I think parents have the same thing with kids a lot. The parents feel like they have to be a certain thing. I've plenty of worked with a lot of teenagers over the years and a lot of parents over the years of teenagers, and that part where your teenager's becoming more independent, and there's a weird push and pull between a lot of parents where they want them to stay where they are because they're scared of the change, but then it's a natural thing for wanting them to be more independent. So there's this big inner conflict there, very similar to what you're describing. Cheryl says, definitely, I have been trying to keep busy while off from work these past couple weeks, because if not, I get in an anxiety frozen state on the couch. Cheryl, can you talk a little bit more about the anxiety frozen state? Because I think I know what you're talking about, but I'd love to know more.
There's a certain experience I get, which may be very similar, where I'll just get kind of in a loop of overstimulation. So I'll be sitting there and I'm not sure what to do. There's just something that wants to be felt or seen or done. It's like I'm not comfortable just sitting there, but I don't know what I would do if I got up. And so I check my phone. And then I look at my phone until I snap out of it. I'm like, wait a minute, no, I shouldn't be doing that. And then I sit there for like 10 minutes and I'm like thinking, but I don't know what else to do. And it doesn't happen. It tends to happen like when there's just this blank in my day, like where everyone's out of the house.
Yeah.
I've done all my work and I'm just like, I don't want to watch more TV. What do I do? And it's boredom, right? It's just this sense of
feels like a frozen
boredom.
state to me, though. Like you don't know what the next thing to do is. Like you've got time.
It's both for sure. It's like you're like, it's like a weird combination of you could do anything, but you don't want to do anything at the same time. And for me, I know that in those moods, I usually forget this, so I'm definitely not perfect with it. But what really helps is this reminder that the way that I feel will follow the way that I act. And if I can just act for like 20 minutes, then I'll feel like doing that thing. So if I'm not in the mood to clean the kitchen, if I just start and for 20 minutes stick with it, all of a sudden I'm in the mood. If I am not in the mood to do whatever it is that I could be doing, if I can just start and build that momentum, within like 20 minutes, the brain just kind of goes, okay, I guess this is what we're doing.
Yeah.
And I realized this is like a neurochemical thing where your body loves equilibrium and it loves the state you're currently in. And so if the state you're currently in is sad, it's like, well, we're still alive, aren't we? Why change it? That would take energy. That would take a lot of internal rearranging of things. So it's actually difficult to shift out of that state, out of any state, especially the longer you've been in it. So it's not about finding the moment where you feel inspired or waiting for things to just like change. Sometimes you really do need to just say, okay, I have a momentum of sadness and a momentum of fear right now. Let me just shift it by taking action. Take action for like 20 minutes. It'll be uncomfortable. You won't feel like doing it. But after like 20 minutes, you're now moving in that new direction.
It's beautifully put. Yeah, it's really interesting. I've never heard it put like that before. It's really powerful.
Thank you.
Good job.
Hey, man. Thank you.
Cheryl says that step 7 stumps me. Thanks for bringing it up. First of all, that step 7 stumps me is hard to say really fast. And also, what is step 7? Is that of the 12 steps?
I don't know. What is the 12 steps? I haven't looked at that in a while.
It's been a minute. 7 steps where we make change in our attitude, which permits us, with humility as our guide, to move out from ourselves towards others.
Wow.
And toward God. The whole emphasis of step 7 is on humility.
Wow, what a beautiful.
It is a beautiful
way to put that.
Yeah, that's really great. It stumps you to change, where we make the change in our attitude, which allows us, with humility as our guide, to move out from ourselves towards others and towards God. I mean, Cheryl, I think it's a deepening the awareness of. I would take it to the next level and say it's to step out towards others and towards God. The humility in kind of knowing. Well, this is my interpretation. The humility in knowing you don't know, and like being willing to more go with the flow than control. It's kind of like the serenity prayer. And the humility to explore yourself with open curiosity instead of identification with, whatever parts you have or whatever emotions you feel. It's more like that ability to be like, wow, I don't know. And let me explore and get more information. That's how I interpret it in a way, in one certain way.
Humility to me is like definitely one part staying in that unknown. So you're not like concluding anything immediately. I don't know. You're open. You're very in touch with just the reality that you don't know. And then further, that humility is a sense of unimportance. And it's not in a way of putting yourself down.
Right.
It's just a sense of I'm not the center of the world. I'm not the center of the universe. And if I don't do something or perform well, that's part of it. There's a great saying, be humble or be humiliated. And I feel like that's going back to that theme of when you're out of alignment, life tends to push you in the direction of alignment. And that can feel like challenge.
Mm.
And so when people say, nothing is going for me, what am I doing wrong? Well, there may be something in your life that is pushing you. And it's not even like a metaphysical, like, oh, what can I learn from this? It's like you're making a certain mistake
right,
repetitively, and it's hitting you. And with the humility thing, it's like, think about that. Think about the type of person that would be humiliated, right? for one, there's a sense of self-assuredness there, where it's like they were confident but wrong, and they put themselves out there, and it was a very public maybe not a public failure, but a public rejection it's a reconfiguration of how they see themselves, essentially.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like, I've got this image of who I am, and then life or other people test that image and it cracks. And I realize, I'm not who I thought I was. And that to me is like humility. You're coming into a more real, accurate expression of who you are. There's less facade there. There's less vanity. There's less covering up some essential part, and just more, well, here I am. And who knows what that'll show up as, for depending on who you are.
Yeah. Cheryl says, yep, she sits and ruminates about everything, the overwhelmed situation. And then she says, yep. And I think that was when you were talking about...
Just the movement.
Yep. Yeah. Lisa Halfman-Conkle, welcome. Yes, and I ping-pong from thinking about one thing to the next in worry. Yeah, Lisa, this is a really common sensation, just the ping-ponging thoughts as you thought about it, and worrying about this and worrying about that and worrying about this and worrying about that. And you can run this what if exercise as well, Lisa. But furthermore, I would start to implement some kind of parts model in there, meaning like this part of you that's worried about this one thing. Well, what would it look like if you kind of just put it next to you and listen to it? What would it say? And the other thing too is, Lisa, is you can use some systems thinking to like write down things you have to do if there's like tasks you're worried about, or even just if there's a situation you're worried about, you can write it out just to gain some clarity about, okay, well, here's the situation. I have to work this job and I hate it and I feel stuck because I feel like I need to make money. And then as you're writing it down, you can maybe reprocess while you're doing it and say, well, I could make money other ways. I could get out of this situation. I could, there's always something you can do to better the situation and to understand yourself more deeply. Cheryl says, yes. Edita says, my legs move when I sit quietly. I sit in the moment and it goes away. It's great. Cheryl asks, is the question about if this is true, then what does it mean about me?
Yes.
That's a CBT question.
Yes. And that is like the right wording. If this is true, then what does it mean about me? And,
right.
And the thing that you're asking if it's true is the thought. Let's say that the pattern goes, if I am not productive, then I won't be valuable.
No, it might be just I'm not productive. That could just be a thought right there.
Right.
So if I'm not productive, so if that's true, what does that mean about you? This is going to hit you. This is going to hurt.
Yeah. It's like, then I'm not valuable.
You have that thought.
I have that all the time.
Sometimes that you're not productive.
Yeah. That's primarily what drives my addiction to caffeine, which is if there's a day where I feel some sense of like unworthiness or something like that, then the cover up or the method to cover that up is like, well, let's be productive. Let's accomplish something.
Right. And but what you really want to do, let's source it back for you.
Yeah. So this is great.
Just to show. So this is a common kind of CBT practice. You have a thought about yourself, and so you say you're not productive.
Yeah. So it's like, I'm not feeling very productive. So then I go, okay, if that's true, if it's true that I'm not productive, then what does that mean about me? Well, it might mean that I'm lazy. It might mean that I'm not valuable. It might mean that I'm not contributing. So all three of those you could ask that question to. Yeah. So then let's say you pick one, you go, okay, if it's true that I'm not valuable, what does that mean? Well, it might mean that I'm a burden to society. I won't be able to get a job. I'm bringing people down. I'm not going to be able to make money. So all four of those are, again, you could do all of them just to pick one. You can say, okay, so if I'm not productive, I'm not valuable. If I'm not valuable, if that's true, then I might not be able to get a job. Okay. So if it's true that I can't get a job, what does that mean about me? Well, it means that I'm, unemployable and I can't make money and I won't be able to take care of myself. Okay, now we're kind of getting into some deeper water.
Right.
If it's true that I can't take care of myself, what does that mean? Well, I'll be dependent on others, or, you know, if I'm, and they're, you know, so if it's true that I'll be dependent on others, what does that mean about me? Well, it means that I'm just, you know, not very worthwhile. And so you see how it kind of gets to the core
And it'll
issue.
go deep.
It'll go very
deep.
That's just getting started.
So we're not giving merit or truth to the thought. What we're doing is we're exploring where it's coming from. There's a deeper core belief in there. Once you hit that core belief, you can usually tell, because you'll start to have some sort of emotional reaction, like heavy emotional reaction. And what you want to do when you hit that core belief is start by locating that emotion in the body and spend some time with just processing it. Focus on it. Let it, if it feels like a sadness, feel the sadness. Invite it in to invite it in to get to know it better. Invite it in to show you more signs of itself, that kind of sad part or wherever that stuck feeling is. And for me, what I like to do is, if I feel a sad part of me, or if I feel a part that feels rejected or not worthwhile, I like to just and this is just what I do, but you could do some version of it. I like to visualize myself just kind of squeezing it and holding it close and just letting it know, hey, it's okay, or letting it know, like, hey, I can take, you know, we can release this, like, you can give it to me. And that'll typically provoke some sort of crying or a sadness or some sort of emotion that feels like it's like a release, and that feels really good.
How do you, tell me again, you go from, let's say you have identified some core thing of like unworthiness or hurt or whatever. How do you make that jump from, okay, I've identified this thing, to I've now personified it and I can see it as a person or a part of me, and I'm giving it?
It starts with if you have a feeling that's with the thought, the more deeper core thought. So if I say something like, I'm alone, or I'm incompetent, and if I feel a sensation like a wave of sadness, the first thing I do is try to locate it in the body. Where is it? Usually it's the chest, the stomach. A lot of times for me it's the throat. Like maybe there's something trying to keep a cry or keep something down. And so I stick with it, and I just focus on that sensation, and I just let it know I'm here. I ask myself, how do I feel towards it? And if I feel curious, loving, compassionate, I'll go deeper into it and invite it forward. And then if I see something, or it triggers a past version of me, or a character or whatever, I'll just think about just squeezing it and saying, hey, it's okay. Like, I can take it. Like, well, do you want to release this? And if it says yes, or if I feel like it's an affirmative, or sometimes it might disappear, like it doesn't want to be seen, or it's not ready to, and that's normal too. But if it feels like it's joining me on the journey, then I can just invite it and say, hey, I can take it. Like, why don't we let this go? And a lot of times for me, and this is just a personal thing, I'll have this part of me that tries to choke down a cry, that holds it. So then I'll reassure that, like, it's okay. Like, let this out. And just from this very calm state. And then it'll just turn into a cry, and I might need to say, it's still okay. Like, it's okay. Like, it's still okay. So we can let it out. It's okay. We don't need to be strong. We don't need to be anything. We just need to be here. And most of the time, after practicing that for a while, it's consistently healthy and helpful, like big time. And then it feels like a big release, because then after the release, there's like you're coming back to a kind of equilibrium, like you were talking about, which is like, wow, okay. And I know intellectually, like, what to do. I know that, hey, this isn't the truth. This isn't based in objective truth. This is based on a past experience. This is based on a trauma or a pain.
That was really, really cool. Thank you for describing that, because I often get stuck with CBT in that question. It's really good for clarity and kind of getting down into like, oh, okay, this is kind of what's going on. But there definitely is sometimes a gap of like, okay, now that I've identified that I believe that, or that I think that on some level, what is the next step? How do I let go of that belief? How do I let go of that thought? Yeah. And that was a really beautiful, like, how to bridge that.
That's my process, but I think everybody's process is somewhat a variant on that. But find your process. I mean, it really comes from like the key things, like going to meet that emotion with curiosity and compassion. That's number one.
Yeah.
And then just creating a space to like kind of introduce yourself and let it know you're there. Yeah. You definitely don't have to be Cheryl. You don't have to be the strong one. That's, only when it feels right. It's really interesting because like in a crisis situation, I'm amazing. Like it's such an automatic thing. But like when things go wrong, like big things, like car accidents, a big cut, something really intense, there's something in me that just, it doesn't feel like I'm I have to do this. It's just like, all right, move this, everything goes. It's really wild. I don't know where that comes from. Cheryl says, is the question about, we asked that. Spirituality helps me so much. Silent prayer, meditation, amazing at night. Peace. Cool, man.
That's a beautiful, beautiful practice.
Let's read these last two and then we'll wrap up here.
Okay.
My leg bounces, Lisa Halfman Conkle. Is she new? That name doesn't sound familiar. Welcome.
I've had that issue of your leg bouncing or...
Oh, I didn't read it yet.
Let's see. My leg bounces continuously when I try to sit still. So much. So coworkers, my students, my kids, everyone notices. Okay, so...
It's a symptom.
Yeah, it's a symptom. You're obviously anxious or nervous or some kind of agitated state. And as a way to relieve that, your body is looking for some kind of movement. Now, what's interesting is what would be best in this situation is if you did go and take a short walk or a jog or some form of physical exercise. Like your body has this energy that wants to come out. So one way to handle it is to go and move your body. When that's not, convenient, maybe you're at work or something, and you're at your desk and there's that sensation. It's not, don't think of it as like, well, now I got to suppress this sensation. It's more about what is the emotional state that is causing this. And if you look closely, it's of course some kind of anxiety, some kind of restless energy. And just like what Jim was describing very well, in like that, going into that emotion, finding its location, being present with it, talking to it, checking it out, doing everything that he just said to that experience. What you'll notice is the little jumpy bounce will start to simmer down. There'll be less need to do anything. And you can start, if you're having a hard time noticing where the location is, you can start by be totally still. Relax every muscle in your body and be totally still. And then let that desire build. It'll build in you, and you'll feel with more clarity the location of the restlessness, the location of that energy. And then you can apply that practice of noticing it, feeling it, not judging it in any kind of way. And then from there, you'll feel it kind of moving around, shifting around, and hopefully you'll feel settled, totally settled.
Yeah. Cheryl says, thank you. I always had to be the strong one. Now I don't always have to be. Thanks. Yeah. Be whatever you are. Be whatever energy you're in the moment. It's really great. So, yeah, well, that's it.
Thank you, everyone, for being here tonight. Really, really appreciate the great questions, the great stories about... I'm glad everyone kind of jumped aboard the authenticity topic and shared some personal examples. Reach out to us if you have any questions. Our emails are there. We'd love to talk with you. Beyond that, just take care of yourself. Continue showing up in the day-to-day and noticing that alignment of when you're doing or being or saying something that's not quite in alignment. And it kind of becomes a devotion to yourself, to the truth, to what feels right, that conscious, that gut.
Yeah. And just slow down and get really curious about yourself. You are so much in this body, in this mind, in this spirit, and everything. And I don't mean to sound too hippy dippy, but it's true. Get very curious about why you're doing what you want, and just ask that question: Why? Why do I feel this way?
Yeah.
Why am I saying this thing? Beyond that, no matter how bad things are, no matter where you are in life, no matter how intense it may feel, you're never stuck. We're here to support you. So check in the subtext right there. There's a link to our YouTube page with lots of great resources. We're here every Tuesday on Facebook, simulcasting Facebook and YouTube at 7 p.m. Central Time in America. So join us, and please share with friends. And if there's anything you need, you can message us on Facebook, or our emails are in that description as well. For Ennis, I'm Jim. Lots of love to you guys. And just remember, be you.